One day I sat in the boardroom, leading a multi-million-dollar project presentation to the executives. The next week, I held a mop. No handover, no clear explanation, just an urgent administrative order. When I discovered the real reason behind my demotion from senior strategic analyst to janitor, I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I planned. And when you're invisible in the shadows of a building you once helped run, you see things others think are hidden. That's when the real work begins. My name is Rachel Hart, and until 3 weeks ago, I was somebody at Velen Dynamics, Senior Strategic Analyst, to be exact. The kind of title that made my working-class Irish mother beam with pride every time she told her friends what her daughter did for a living. At 35, I'd clawed my way up from entry-level grunt work to leading multi-million-dollar M&A deals for one of Chicago's most prestigious financial consulting firms. The Velen building stood like a glass monument to capitalism on LaSalle Street. 42 floors of steel and ambition. I'd spent 8 years learning every corridor, every conference room, every unspoken rule of its ecosystem. In this place, success wasn't just about spreadsheets and market analysis, it was about playing the game. And I'd become damn good at it. Or so I thought. The executive floor might as well have been another country, populated by men who wore their privilege as casually as their Italian suits. The Old Boys Club wasn't just a cliché here, it was architecture. Darren Wells, our CEO, presided over it all with the kind of smooth confidence that came from never having to earn anything the hard way. 53, silver-haired, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes, he collected vintage cars and younger women with equal enthusiasm. I'd worked directly under Mark Ellison, Senior VP of Strategic Operations, who'd been my mentor and, I'd foolishly believed, my advocate. Mark had promised me things, not in writing, of course, but in those careful corporate ways. "Rachel, you're exactly what we need in senior leadership," he'd said just 2 months ago. "Fresh perspective, real talent, not just another nepotism hire." The irony of that statement would hit me later, like a freight train. Sophie Linwood was the only other woman who'd made it past middle management, running the risk assessment division with surgical precision. We weren't friends, this place didn't encourage female solidarity, but we shared the occasional knowing glance across conference rooms full of men who talked over us. Sophie kept her distance, and I respected that. In this environment, other women weren't allies. They were competition for the single, diversity spot at the executive table. I'd been tracking the TechHorn acquisition for months, building models, running scenarios, preparing what I knew would be the deal that launched me into the VP position Mark had been dangling. The healthcare startup had developed revolutionary patient monitoring technology, and Velen was positioning itself as the financial architect of the merger. $10 million. My biggest project yet. The Monday everything changed started like any other. I arrived at 6:30 a.m., badge swiping me through security, heels clicking across marble as I made my way to the elevator. The security guard, Jerome, gave me his usual nod. The coffee cart lady, Maria, already had my order ready. These were the invisible people who kept Velen running, though most executives couldn't tell you their names. I should have noticed the sideways glances when I walked through the strategy department. Should have caught the way conversations died as I passed. But I was focused on the TechHorn presentation scheduled for that afternoon, running through numbers in my head. It wasn't until I found Aaron Lyle sitting at my desk that the first alarm bell rang. Aaron, 27, unremarkable, with the kind of aggressive mediocrity that somehow passed for confidence, looked up from my computer with badly concealed satisfaction. "Oh, hey Rachel, didn't they tell you? I'm taking over the TechHorn project." The words didn't compute. I'd been eating, sleeping, breathing this deal for 3 months. Aaron had been hired 6 weeks ago and still couldn't tell the difference between EBITDA and operating margin without checking his notes. "There must be some mistake," I said, maintaining the calm that had served me well in hostile negotiations. "No mistake." Darren's voice came from behind me. He stood in my office doorway, my former office doorway, with Mark flanking him like a reluctant executioner. "Rachel, we need to talk about your new position with the company." The next 15 minutes blurred together in corporate doublespeak, restructuring, efficiency optimization, exploring new roles that better utilize my skill set. Through it all, Darren's eyes never met mine, while Mark studied his phone with sudden fascination. "I don't understand," I finally interrupted. "I've exceeded every metric, every target." "This isn't about performance," Darren said, the lie sliding smooth as aged whiskey. "We simply feel your talents would be better served in a more foundational role." That's when they told me, janitorial services, effective immediately. The words hung in the air like a bad joke waiting for a punchline that never came. Senior strategic analyst to janitor. 8 years of excellence reduced to a mop and bucket. No transition period. No explanation that made sense. Just a transfer paper and a new badge that would only access the service elevators and basement levels. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I signed the paper with hands that barely trembled and walked out of that office with my spine straight. It wasn't until later, standing in the supply closet that smelled of industrial bleach and broken dreams, that I allowed myself to ask the question that would change everything. Why? The answer, when it came, would be worth more than any VP title. But first, I had to learn to be invisible. In a building full of people who'd stopped seeing me the moment I held a mop instead of a portfolio. Invisibility would become my greatest weapon. They thought they'd destroyed me. They had no idea they'd just created something far more dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose and all the time in the world to watch from the shadows. The first week as a janitor taught me more about human cruelty than 8 years in corporate strategy ever had. It wasn't the work itself. Pushing a mop, emptying trash, scrubbing toilets. That broke something inside me. It was the erasure. The moment I put on that gray uniform, I ceased to exist. People who'd sought my advice on million-dollar deals now spoke around me like I was furniture. Executive assistants who'd scheduled my meetings scrolled through their phones while I cleaned around their feet. The transformation was complete and immediate. From Rachel Hart, strategic analyst, to nobody. My supervisor, Eddie Kowalski, was a decent man who'd worked maintenance for 20 years. He showed me the ropes with a gentleness that suggested he knew this wasn't where I belonged. "You take the executive floors at night," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Less interaction that way. Less humiliation," he meant. My mother called twice that first week. I let it go to voicemail. How could I tell the woman who'd worked 2 jobs to put me through Northwestern that her daughter now cleaned the toilets of men who earned my yearly salary in a month? The shame sat in my chest like swallowed glass. But it was Thursday night, alone on the 14th floor, when the fog of shock finally lifted. I was emptying Darren's wastebasket when I saw it. A printed email, carelessly discarded. Aaron Lyle's name caught my eye first, then the words that made my blood freeze. "Uncle D, thanks for making this happen. Family takes care of family, right?" Uncle D. Darren. The pieces clicked with sickening clarity. Aaron wasn't just incompetent, he was Darren's nephew. Not by blood, but through Darren's wife's sister. Close enough for nepotism, distant enough to avoid HR red flags. My position, my project, my future. All handed to a kid who couldn't analyze his way out of a paper bag but had the right last name at family barbecues. I sat on Darren's leather chair, holding that email, and laughed. Actually laughed. The sound echoed off the windows overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. A bitter crescendo that marked the death of Rachel Hart, corporate climber, and the birth of something else. The next 3 weeks became my education in invisibility. I learned the executive floor's rhythms, when security did their rounds, which offices stayed late, who forgot to lock their computers. I became a ghost in gray, pushing my cart through halls of power while my former colleagues worked late on projects I'd originated. Sophie Linwood was the only one who still saw me. The first time our eyes met, me mopping the hallway, her leaving a partner meeting, she stopped mid-stride. Something flickered across her face. Pity? Recognition? She opened her mouth, closed it, then hurried past. But she'd seen me. That mattered, though I didn't know why yet. My breaking point came the night I cleaned the boardroom after a strategy session. My replacement had presented the tech horn analysis, my analysis, with his name on it. The whiteboard still showed my frameworks, my models, my months of work claimed by a boy who'd needed 3 tries to pass his Series 7. I stared at those boards, spray bottle in hand, and made a decision. They wanted me invisible. Fine. But invisible people see everything. And in a place built on secrets and shady deals, that was its own kind of power. That night, I didn't erase the whiteboards immediately. Instead, I photographed everything with my phone. Then I did something I'd never done before. I went through the meeting notes left behind, shredded documents, discarded drafts, the detritus of power that everyone assumed would disappear with the trash. What I found changed everything. The Techhorn deal numbers were wrong. Not accidentally wrong, deliberately falsified. Revenue projections inflated by 40%. Regulatory risks buried in footnotes. Debt obligations mysteriously absent. This wasn't just nepotism anymore. This was fraud. Securities fraud, to be specific. And I should know. I'd helped build the legitimate frameworks they were now butchering. I sat in that empty boardroom until 3 a.m., pieces of a larger puzzle forming in my mind. Why put Aaron on this deal? He was too stupid to catch the fraud, too green to ask the right questions. The perfect patsy, protected by family ties but expendable if things went south. Except, things wouldn't go south. Would they? Not if no one was looking. Not if the person who would have caught these discrepancies was currently scrubbing their toilets. My demotion wasn't just about nepotism. It was about removing the one person who would have spotted this fraud before it was too late. They hadn't just stolen my job. They'd turned it into a crime scene. I gathered the documents carefully, stuffing them into my cleaning cart beneath rolls of paper towels. My hands shook, but not from fear, from rage. Pure, crystalline rage that cut through months of self-doubt and shame. They thought they'd broken me, thought they'd neutralized a threat, but they'd made a critical error, the kind I'd have caught if I were still reviewing their strategies. They'd forgotten that the person who cleans up your mess sees all your dirt. Walking out that night, I passed Jerome at the security desk. "Long night, Ms. Hart?" he asked. Because the invisible people never forgot who you really were. "Just getting started," I told him. He smiled like he understood, and maybe he did. Maybe everyone who'd been stepped on by this machine understood that sometimes the only way out was through. Sometimes you had to burn it all down. I had evidence, I had access, I had nothing left to lose. What I needed now was a plan. The 14th floor was supposed to be empty at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. That's why I heard them. Darren's voice, low and urgent, bleeding through the conference room door I was about to clean. "The SEC sniffing around is the last thing we need right now." A pause. "No. Listen to me. The Techhorn valuation has to hold until we close. After that, it's their problem." I froze, hand on my cart. Through the frosted glass, I could make out 3 shadows: Darren, Mark, and someone I didn't recognize. My heartbeat thundered so loud I was sure they'd hear it. "The pension fund managers are already on board," the stranger said. "They think they're getting a piece of revolutionary healthcare tech. By the time they realize the patents are worthless, we'll have moved the money through the Cayman accounts." Patents worthless? I pressed closer, every instinct screaming danger. "What about the girl?" Mark's voice, thick with something that might have been guilt. "Rachel could have. Rachel's scrubbing shitters where she belongs." Darren cut him off. Amazing how a few whispers about performance issues and attitude problems make people forget 8 years of excellence. Aaron's too stupid to see what we're doing, and too family to talk if he did. They laughed. Actually laughed about destroying my career to facilitate their fraud. "The merger announcement is set for the 28th, Darren continued. "Black tie event at the Peninsula. Media, investors, the whole show. 10 million from Techhorn's inflated sale. Another 15 from the pension funds buying in based on false projections. We clear 25 million minimum before anyone knows what hit them." The due diligence reports are being handled. Cooper at Ernst & Young owes me. The numbers will say whatever we need them to say. I backed away silently, my mind racing. This wasn't just securities fraud anymore. This was a conspiracy involving pension funds, retirement money for teachers, firefighters, regular people who'd trusted their futures to these vultures. The scope of it made my personal destruction seem almost quaint. For the next week, I became a different kind of analyst. Every trash can became a data source, every forgotten printout, a puzzle piece. I learned their patterns. Mark always printed emails before shredding them. But he was sloppy, often missing pages. Darren's assistant regularly threw away his handwritten notes without shredding at all. The cocaine-fueled VP of acquisitions left his computer unlocked more often than not. I built my case document by document, photo by photo. The false Techhorn financials. Emails discussing the need to handle the Rachel problem. Wire transfer authorizations to shell companies. A paper trail of greed so brazen they'd never imagined someone like me, someone invisible, would piece it together. But evidence without a plan was just paper. That's when I remembered Sophie Linwood. I intercepted her one night as she worked late, stepping out of the shadows like the ghost I'd become. She startled, hand flying to her chest. Jesus, Rachel, you scared me. We need to talk. She glanced around the empty hallway. I can't. They're stealing from pension funds. Sophie, 25 million. Maybe more. Her face went pale. That's a serious accusation. I have proof. I pulled out my phone, showed her a fraction of what I'd collected, watched her expression shift from skepticism to horror. My God. She sank into a chair. I knew something was off with the Techhorn numbers, but this... They demoted me because I would have caught it. Put Aaron in because he wouldn't. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you need? Access to the merger presentation files. The real ones, not the sanitized versions they're showing investors. That's on the secured server. I'd need... She stopped. Understanding dawning. You want me to risk my career. They're risking teachers' retirements, firefighters' futures. For what? Another yacht? Another mistress? She winced. We both knew about Darren's business trips with his 23-year-old assistant. There's something else, she said finally. I've been tracking unusual activity in our client accounts. Money moving in circles, always landing back with shell companies connected to board members. I thought I was paranoid, but now you know you weren't. She stood, decision made. I'll get you the files. But Rachel, if we do this, we do it right. No half measures. We burn it all down, or we burn with it. Agreed. Over the next 2 weeks, Sophie became my inside source while I remained the invisible collector of their sins. She fed me server passwords, meeting schedules, insider information. I gathered, documented, organized. We met in the building's forgotten corners, storage rooms, the old smoking balcony, places where 2 women could plan a revolution without notice. The picture that emerged was worse than we'd imagined. The Techhorn fraud was just the latest in a pattern going back years. Inflated valuations, insider trading, embezzlement disguised as consulting fees. Velen Dynamics wasn't a financial consulting firm. It was a criminal enterprise in Armani suits. We need more than evidence, Sophie said one night, reviewing our collection. We need them to confess. They're too smart for that. Are they? She smiled, and I saw the shark she'd hidden beneath professional pleasantry. The announcement gala is in a week. They'll be drunk on champagne and their own cleverness. All we need is the right recording equipment in the right places. I thought about the Peninsula's ballroom, where I'd attended galas in designer dresses instead of a janitor's uniform. Thought about the service corridors I now knew better than any executive. I can get us in, I said. But once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. Good, Sophie said. I'm tired of going back. Aren't you? I was so tired of swallowing rage, of pretending their boot on my neck was just business. They'd tried to erase me, but they'd only made me invisible. and invisible women could go anywhere, see everything, strike without warning. The gala was in 7 days. 7 days to finalize a plan that would either destroy them or destroy us. 7 days to prepare for the greatest performance of my life. They wanted a janitor. I'd give them one. Right up until the moment I cleaned house for real. The plan came together like a hostile takeover, methodical, ruthless, and designed for maximum impact. Sophie and I met every night after my shifts, turning her apartment into a war room. Charts covered the walls, timelines mapped every movement. We weren't just planning to expose a crime, we were orchestrating a corporate execution. The Peninsula's ballroom has 12 service entrances, I said, spreading out the floor plans I'd sketched from memory. I'll be invisible in catering whites. Just another body in the machine. Sophie nodded, marking positions. I'll be inside as a guest. Darren invited the whole risk assessment team, keeping up appearances. Her laugh was bitter. I've got the recording equipment, military-grade mics that can pick up conversation from 30 feet away. But we needed more than audio. We needed the smoking gun documents. And those lived in Darren's private files, not the digital ones Sophie could access, but the physical papers he kept in his office safe. The paranoid bastard still didn't trust the cloud with his real crimes. I know the combination, I said quietly. Sophie looked up sharply. How? You'd be amazed what people say around the help. He gave it to his assistant last month while I was cleaning. His wife's birthday, 03/15/72. Careless. Or arrogant. Same thing, in the end. We mapped out every minute of the gala night. Sophie would work the room, planting audio devices in strategic locations, the VIP lounge, the smoking terrace, anywhere alcohol might loosen lips. I'd use my access to photograph the safe's contents, then upload everything to a secured server. But it was my old contact at the Chicago Tribune, Janet Morrison, who gave us our nuclear option. Live streaming, she said when I called from a burner phone. If you can get me real-time footage of them discussing the fraud, I'll have it online before they can spell lawyer. That's possible. But Janet, this is bigger than just Velen. There are pension funds involved, people's retirements. All the more reason to burn these fuckers down. You get me the story, Rachel. I'll make sure the world sees it. The week before the gala blurred into preparation, I maintained my janitor routine, invisible as ever. While building our arsenal, Sophie played her part perfectly, even accepting Darren's congratulations on her excellent work maintaining client confidence. The irony nearly choked her, but she smiled and nodded like the good soldier they thought she was. 3 nights before the gala, we hit a snag. Aaron Lyle, my incompetent replacement, had somehow stumbled onto discrepancies in the Techhorn valuation. He's asking questions, Sophie reported, voice tight with worry. Stupid questions, but questions nonetheless. I found Aaron working late, sweating over spreadsheets he didn't understand. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You should go home, I said, emptying his trash. He startled, then recognized me. His face cycled through embarrassment, pity, and finally, dismissal. Yeah, well, some of us have real work to do. The Techhorn numbers don't add up, do they? He froze. What do you know about it? I know you're in over your head. I know your uncle put you here thinking you'd be too stupid to notice the fraud. I know that when this explodes, and it will explode, you'll be the one holding the bag. You're crazy. But his voice shook. Uncle Darren said, your uncle is setting you up, Aaron. When the SEC comes knocking, guess whose signature is on all those fraudulent reports? I watched him pale as the reality hit. The boy might be incompetent, but he wasn't stupid enough to miss self-preservation. What do I do? He whispered. Nothing. Keep your head down, your mouth shut, and be sick the night of the gala. Whatever happens, you want to be nowhere near that building. He nodded frantically. One less variable to worry about. The final pieces came together with surgical precision. Sophie cracked the last server passwords. I mapped every camera blind spot in the peninsula. Janet assembled her team. ready to go live at a moment's notice. We even had backup, a contact at the SEC Sophie had been cultivating, ready to freeze accounts the moment we provided evidence. But it was what I found in the dumpster behind Velin 2 nights before the gala that changed everything. Shredded documents, poorly reassembled, revealed the full scope. This wasn't just about Techhorn. There were 12 other deals over 5 years, each following the same pattern. Inflate, sell, disappear the evidence. Total theft. Over $100 million. Jesus Christ, Sophie breathed when I showed her. This is RICO territory. They destroyed me for $10 million, I said quietly. But they've been destroying lives for years. We sat in silence, absorbing the weight of what we'd uncovered. Tomorrow night, we wouldn't just be exposing a fraud, we'd be demolishing an empire. You can still walk away, I offered. This is my fight, not, shut up. Sophie's voice was steel. They made it my fight the day they assumed I'd look the other way because I was grateful for my seat at their table. Fuck their table. Let's flip it. I smiled, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not hope, something better. Purpose. 24 hours until the gala. 24 hours until we turned their celebration into a funeral. My phone buzzed, Janet confirming her team was ready. Sophie's laptop pinged, the SEC contact awaiting our signal. I looked at my reflection in Sophie's window, gray uniform, tired eyes, invisible woman. Perfect. They'd made me a ghost, forgetting that ghosts have nothing left to fear. You know what the best part is? I said. What? They're going to pay $30,000 for the privilege of having their lives destroyed. That's what the peninsula charges for a gala like this. Sophie laughed, dark and delighted. Let's make sure they get their money's worth. We clinked coffee mugs like champagne glasses, toasting the culmination of weeks of planning. Tomorrow night, Rachel Hart the janitor would walk into that ballroom, but something else entirely would walk out, something that looked a lot like justice. The Peninsula Hotel glittered like a jewel against Chicago's skyline. Its ballroom transformed into a monument to corporate excess. Ice sculptures shaped like dollar signs. Champagne that cost more than my monthly rent. Velin Dynamics had spared no expense for their triumph. I entered through the service dock at 6:47 p.m., just another invisible body in catering whites. My hair was pulled back, thick-rimmed glasses obscuring my face. The manager barely glanced at my forged papers before waving me toward the kitchen. You're on champagne service, he barked. Ballroom floor. Keep the glasses full and your mouth shut. Perfect. Sophie was already inside, resplendent in a black cocktail dress, playing her role as the loyal executive. Through the kitchen's porthole windows, I watched her work the room, each air kiss and handshake positioning another recording device. She'd hidden them in lipstick tubes, compacts, even the decorative brooch on her dress. By 7:15, the ballroom was wired like a federal investigation. The guests arrived in waves, pension fund managers, Techhorn executives, reporters from the financial press. All here to witness Darren Wells cement his legacy. I moved among them with my tray. Invisible, in plain sight, catching fragments of conversation that made my skin crawl. Brilliant move by Wells, one fund manager said. Techhorn's patents alone are worth $20 million. If only he knew those patents had been invalidated 6 months ago. At 7:45, I made my move. Slipping into the service elevator, I rode to the executive floor. My janitor's keycard still worked, an oversight that would cost them everything. Darren's office was dark. The safe behind his Princeton diploma exactly where I remembered. 03s, 15 such as 72. The tumblers clicked. Inside lay the real books, handwritten ledgers like some mafia don, documenting every fraudulent deal, every kickback, every life destroyed for profit. I photographed each page, uploaded them to our secure server, then carefully returned everything to its place. That's when I heard footsteps. Mark Ellison stood in the doorway, face cycling through shock, recognition, and something like regret. Rachel. I straightened, meeting his gaze without flinching. Mark. What are you? He stopped, seeing the open safe. Understanding dawned. You know, I've known for weeks. He closed the door behind him, and for a moment, I tensed, but he just sagged against it, suddenly looking every one of his 53 years. I tried to stop it, he said quietly. The demotion. Darren overruled me. Yo, Ari, but you didn't fight very hard, did you? His silence was answer enough. You knew what they were planning, I continued. The fraud, the pension funds, all of it, and you chose your corner office over your conscience. You don't understand the pressure. I understand that teachers in Southside Chicago are going to lose their retirements because you lacked a spine. He flinched. What are you going to do? I could have lied, should have lied, but looking at this man who'd once mentored me, I felt only exhaustion. What you should have done months ago. His phone buzzed, a text summoning him to the ballroom. The signing ceremony was beginning. He looked at me one last time, something desperate in his eyes. Rachel, please. We can work something out. I'll get you reinstated, promoted. With what authority? You just admitted Darren overrules you. I pushed past him. Enjoy the party, Mark. It's the last one you'll attend as a free man. I made it back to the ballroom just as Darren took the stage. He stood beneath a banner reading, Velon Tech Horn, Pioneering Healthcare's Financial Future. His smile broad and predatory. The crowd hushed, champagne glasses raised in anticipation. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, tonight marks a historic moment. I circulated with my tray, watching Sophie position herself near the media section. Janet Morrison was there, phone discreetly ready. Our eyes met across the room. Sophie nodded. It was time. This merger, Darren continued, represents not just profit, but progress. The pension funds investing tonight aren't just securing returns, they're securing America's healthcare future. That's when I made my move. Not toward Darren, but toward the AV booth. The technician, paid $500 to take a bathroom break, left his station unmanned. I slipped inside, hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. The laptop was already connected to the ballroom screens. I plugged in my USB drive, fingers flying across keys, upload, execute, project. The numbers speak for themselves, Darren was saying. A 40% return guaranteed within. The screens flickered. His PowerPoint vanished, replaced by the first document from his safe, his real handwriting, detailing the fraudulent valuations. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. What the? Darren spun toward the screens as they cycled through image after image, ledgers, emails, wire transfers to the Cayman Islands, each one time-stamped, authenticated, undeniable. Then came the audio. Sophie's recordings from the past weeks, Darren's voice, crystal clear. The pension fund managers are already on board. By the time they realize the patents are worthless, we'll have moved the money. Chaos erupted. Fund managers shouted, demanding answers. Reporters surged forward, cameras rolling. Through it all, the screens kept cycling, displaying every crime in high definition. But I'd saved the best for last. The final image wasn't a document. It was a live feed. Janet Morrison, standing outside the peninsula. Her cameramen focused on her. This is Janet Morrison reporting live. We've just received evidence of massive fraud at Velon Dynamics, including the theft of pension funds and securities violations. Documents show CEO Darren Wells orchestrated. Darren's face had turned the color of old paper. He stumbled off stage, pushing through the crowd, but hotel security was already moving. Sophie had done her job there too, alerting them to check their emergency email for urgent safety information that happened to include arrest warrants the SEC had prepared based on our evidence. I set down my serving tray and walked out of the chaos, pulling off my catering whites to reveal a simple black dress beneath. In the lobby, I passed 24 FBI agents rushing in, their timing coordinated with Janet's broadcast. Sophie met me on the street, her eyes bright with something between exhaustion and exhilaration. Holy shit! We actually did it! Yeah, I said, watching through the windows as agents surrounded Darren. We did. My phone buzzed. Aaron Lyle. Thank you. I understand now. Another buzz. This time my mother. Rachel, honey, are you seeing the news? Something about your old company? I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. Tomorrow, there would be depositions, investigations, trials. But tonight, I wasn't a janitor or an analyst or a victim. I was the woman who'd brought down an empire with a mop bucket and a USB drive. Buy you a drink? Sophie asked. Make it champagne, I said. The good stuff. I think we've earned it. Behind us, the peninsula blazed with red and blue lights. The party of the year transformed into the crime scene of the century. Somewhere in that chaos, Darren Wells was learning what invisibility really felt like. The aftermath unfolded like a Shakespearean tragedy played out on CNBC. Within 48 hours, Velen Dynamics became the most toxic name in finance. The FBI raided their offices at dawn, carrying out boxes of evidence while news helicopters circled overhead like vultures sensing death. Darren Wells made bail at $2 million, only to find his assets frozen by the SEC. The image of him doing the perp walk, Armani suit wrinkled, silver hair disheveled, hands cuffed behind his back, became the cover of every financial publication in the country. Forbes ran it with the headline, "The Janitor Who Cleaned House." Mark Ellison flipped immediately, turning state's evidence so fast the FBI joked about whiplash. His testimony revealed the network's full scope, 12 firms, 3 senators, and a federal judge all connected to Velen's web of fraud. He threw everyone under the bus, then backed up and ran them over again for good measure. But for me, the victory felt hollow. I sat in my studio apartment, unemployment checks piling up unopened, watching the coverage with the detachment of someone viewing another person's life. The reporters who called me a whistleblower hero didn't know about the nights I still woke up at 3 a.m., phantom cleaning supplies in my hands. The commentators praising my brilliant investigation didn't understand that I'd simply been trying to survive. Sophie fared better, at least publicly. She'd been recruited by 3 major firms before the dust even settled, her reputation as someone with unshakable integrity making her the hottest commodity in risk management. We met for coffee once, awkwardly navigating our new dynamic. "They're calling you the woman who brought down Wall Street," she said, sliding a Financial Times article across the table. "Hyperbole sells papers. Rachel, you saved thousands of people's retirements. That means something." "Does it?" I stirred my coffee, watching the cream spiral. Those same people probably walked past me every day while I cleaned their offices, never saw me until I was useful to their narrative. She didn't have an answer for that. The legal proceedings dragged on. I testified in closed sessions, my words becoming part of the public record that would send 17 executives to federal prison. Darren got 25 years, though his lawyers were already appealing. The pension funds recovered 60 cents on the dollar, better than nothing. But retirees still lost 40% of their futures. Velen Dynamics dissolved in bankruptcy. The building on LaSalle Street sold to a tech startup that promised to disrupt financial services with ethical AI. I wondered if they kept the same cleaning crew. 3 months after the gala, I got an unexpected call. "Ms. Hart, this is Jerome Washington from Building Security. Remember me?" "Of course, Jerome. How are you?" "Still working, which is more than most folks from Velen can say." He paused. "Listen, I wanted you to know. We all saw what they did to you. The cleaning staff, security, the coffee cart folks. We knew it wasn't right." "Thank you." I managed past the sudden tightness in my throat. "Maria from the coffee cart. She saved all your articles. Has them on her cart. Tells everyone who'll listen about the executive who became a janitor and brought down the bad guys." He chuckled. "You're kind of a hero to us invisible folks." After we hung up, I cried for the first time since this all began. Not from sadness or rage, but from the simple recognition that someone had seen me all along. The offers came eventually. Consulting firms, government agencies, even a few Hollywood producers wanting to buy my story. I turned them all down. Taking their money felt like becoming complicit in the same system that had tried to destroy me. Instead, I did something unexpected. I started a blog. Views from the Night Shift began as therapy, a place to process what had happened. I wrote about the people who really run buildings, the security guards who know everyone's secrets, the cleaning staff who see behind the corporate mask, the maintenance workers who keep the whole illusion functioning. The first post went viral. Then the second. Soon, I had invisible workers from across the country sharing their stories. A janitor at a pharmaceutical company who discovered they were dumping chemicals. A security guard at a tech firm who'd overheard executives planning to sell user data. All these people who'd been trained to be invisible, suddenly finding their voices. 6 months after the Velen collapse, a documentary filmmaker reached out, not about my story, but about theirs. The Invisible Army, she wanted to call it. I agreed to help, but only if the invisible workers told their own stories. The blog became a movement. The movement became legislation. The Corporate Transparency Act, requiring companies to report not just to shareholders, but to all stakeholders, including service workers. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I never returned to finance, never wanted to. The game was still rigged, just with slightly newer rules. But I'd learned something valuable in those months of pushing a mop. Power isn't just about sitting in the corner office. Sometimes it's about understanding that the person cleaning that office sees everything. A year after the gala, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a mop, gold-plated, absurd, with a small card. For the woman who cleaned house, from all of us who see you, the Night Shift. I hung it on my wall, a reminder that revenge isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of reclaiming your voice. They'd tried to erase me by making me invisible. Instead, I'd learned that invisible people, when they finally choose to be seen, can bring down empires. The real power was never in the exposure or the revenge. It was in the solidarity of everyone who'd been stepped on. Finally stepping up. I kept the blog going, kept amplifying voices from the shadows, because somewhere, in another glass tower, another executive was making another Rachel Hart invisible. But now, we were watching. We were organizing. We were ready. They'd taught me to clean up their messes. They just never imagined I'd start with them. 2 years later, I stood before a congressional hearing on corporate accountability, not as Rachel Hart, disgraced analyst or vengeful janitor, but as founder of the Night Shift Coalition, an organization representing 3 million invisible workers across America. Senators, I began, my voice steady in the chamber where power traditionally wore suits, not uniforms. Every building you work in, every office you occupy, is maintained by people you've been trained not to see. We clean your spaces, guard your doors, serve your food. We're the first to know when something's wrong, but the last to be heard. The legislation passed. Not perfectly, not completely, but it passed. Companies were now required to include service worker representatives in whistleblower protections. The Invisible Worker Protection Act. I called it a beginning. Sophie and I stayed in touch. She'd become chief ethics officer at a new firm, one that actually meant it. You changed the game, she told me over drinks one night. No, I corrected. I just reminded people there were other players. The blog evolved into a full platform. We had an app now where service workers could anonymously report corporate malfeasance. 3 more major frauds had been exposed in the past year alone, all by people who'd been invisible until they decided not to be. Aaron Lyle reached out once. He was teaching now. Believe it or not, business ethics at a community college. I tell my students about you, he wrote, about how I got everything handed to me and nearly lost it all, while you lost everything and changed the world. It's a good lesson. My mother finally understood why I'd gone silent those first weeks. You were protecting me, she said, tears in her eyes. Didn't want me to see you hurting. We'd grown closer through this, her pride in my survival meaning more than any corporate title ever had. But it was a message from Eddie Kowalski, my old maintenance supervisor, that meant the most. His granddaughter had used our platform to expose wage theft at her job. She said she was inspired by you, he wrote. Said if an executive could become a janitor and change the world, she could stand up for herself. Thank you for showing her that. I kept the gold-plated mop in my office at the coalition headquarters. Visitors always asked about it, giving me the chance to tell the story. Not the Hollywood version, the woman scorned getting dramatic revenge. The real version, about how systems that make people invisible create their own destruction. The Velen building on LaSalle Street had been renamed. I walked past it sometimes, watching the people stream in and out. The security guard was new, but he nodded at me with recognition. Word travels in the night shift network. I never apologized for what I did to Velen. They'd committed crimes, destroyed lives, perverted justice for profit. But I'd moved beyond revenge. The best response to being erased wasn't just to expose those who'd done it. It was to make sure no one could be erased again. My story became required reading in some business schools, a cautionary tale about the price of arrogance. Professors focused on the fraud, the spectacular collapse, the revenge. They missed the point. This wasn't about one woman's vendetta. It was about what happens when you create a class of people whose humanity you refuse to see. They'd demoted me to janitor thinking it was the ultimate humiliation. They'd never understood it was an education. In those months of invisibility, I'd learned more about power, solidarity, and resilience than 8 years in the executive suite had taught me. The speaking engagements came regularly now. I always started the same way. My name is Rachel Hart. I was somebody, then I was nobody. Then I learned that being nobody might be the most powerful thing of all. Young women especially connected with the message. They'd email about their own experiences of being overlooked, underestimated, made invisible. I told them all the same thing. Your invisibility isn't your weakness. Used right, it's your weapon. The last time I saw Darren Wells was on the news. Prisoner 47832 at Marion Federal Penitentiary, working in the prison laundry. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He'd been literally reduced to washing other people's dirty clothes. But even then, I felt no satisfaction. He was just another cautionary tale now. A footnote in a larger story about corporate accountability. One evening, cleaning out old files, I found my original Velen Dynamics employee badge, Senior Strategic Analyst Rachel Hart, smiling and confident, believing the corporate ladder only went up. I kept it as a reminder, not of what I'd lost, but of what I'd needed to lose to find something real. The coalition's work continued. Every day. More invisible workers found their voices. Every day. The powerful were reminded that their secrets were only as safe as their treatment of the people who cleaned up after them. I'd started this journey clutching a mop, devastated by my demotion. I'd wanted to destroy them, and I had. But destruction was just the first act. Building something better, that was the real work. They'd tried to break me by making me invisible. Instead, they'd shown me that the invisible ones were the ones who truly saw everything. And when we finally decided to speak, the whole world had to listen. I used to clean up their messes. Now, I made sure they couldn't create them in the first place. That's the thing about power. It only works if everyone agrees to the rules. The moment the invisible refuse to play along, the whole game changes. I'd been somebody, then nobody. Then everybody who'd ever been made to feel like nobody. Turns out, that was exactly who I was meant to be. I once lausan ha hoboklan. Gio ho trot trenchin vet no me ho tuang toi kong de. They'd taught me well. I'd just learned different lessons than they'd intended. Thank you so much for listening to this story of revenge, redemption, and the power of the invisible. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Rachel's position? Have you ever felt invisible in your workplace? Let's discuss in the comments. Your support means everything. And remember, sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody notices.